The wind howled across the empty Kansas prairie as the lone traveler urged his weary horse along the Osage Trail. Night was creeping in, and the darkness seemed endless. Then, faint in the distance, a flicker of light, the warm glow of a lantern swinging gently outside a small wooden house. He approached cautiously. The building was simple but inviting, with a sign promising hot meals and a place to rest. A tall, stern man stood in the doorway, his face unreadable. Beside him, a woman smiled faintly, though her eyes didn't quite match the warmth of her lips. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of stew and something metallic. The fire crackled, and a large curtain hung in the middle of the room, swaying ever so slightly, as if touched by a breeze that wasn't there. The traveler sat at the table, grateful for the meal. The family spoke little, their glances sharp and quick. Somewhere beyond the curtain, he thought he heard the faint scrape of wood. It was the last time anyone would see him alive. In the early 1870s, Kansas was a frontier in transition. Vast open plains stretching in every direction, dotted with small farming settlements and the occasional trading post. The Osage Trail cut straight through this rugged landscape, carrying a steady stream of settlers, drifters, traders, and hopeful fortune-seekers heading west. It was a lifeline, but also a lonely and dangerous road. Bandits roamed its edges, storms could roll in without warning, and nights were pitch-black save for the stars. For those traveling long distances, the rare sight of a place to eat, rest, and shelter from the elements was a welcome relief. And about 7 miles outside the small town of Cherryvale, one such place stood, a modest cabin with a hand-painted sign promising supplies, hot meals, and a safe night's sleep. It was here that the Benders had staked their claim. The family of 4 were recent arrivals, part of the wave of spiritualist settlers moving into Kansas after the Civil War. There was John and Elvira, sometimes called Pa and Ma, and their 2 adult children, John Jr. and Kate. They kept mostly to themselves, working the land, running their small inn, and occasionally joining the locals for church gatherings. To passing strangers, the Bender homestead was simply a quiet rest stop along the trail. Yet for reasons no one could quite put into words, there was something different about the place. Something that made travelers glance twice before stepping through that front door. At first, there was nothing unusual about the disappearances. In a land where danger lurked along every mile, travelers sometimes vanished without a trace. A broken wheel in the wilderness, an unexpected storm, or an encounter with the wrong kind of stranger. But by the early 1870s, whispers began to spread along the Osage Trail. People who had last been seen heading toward Cherryvale were simply gone. One of the earliest cases was Dr. William York, a respected physician who was traveling to check on a family member. He stopped at several homesteads along the way, including the Benders. When he didn't arrive at his destination, search parties were formed. Locals recalled others who had gone missing in the same stretch of road, a prospector with a pouch of gold, a minister carrying church funds, families traveling west with all their belongings. What tied these disappearances together was a simple fact. All had likely passed by the Bender Inn. Those who visited and survived would later recall odd details. A curtain dividing the front room from the back, always drawn tight. Guests were offered a seat at the head of the table, their backs conveniently turned toward that curtain. And under that spot, hidden beneath the worn floorboards, was a trapdoor leading to a dark, narrow cellar. The setup was chilling in its simplicity. A guest would sit, distracted by conversation with Kate, the young daughter known for her charm and talk of spiritualism, while one of the men approached quietly from behind the curtain. With a sudden, crushing blow to the skull, the victim would be dropped through the trapdoor into the cellar. There, the final act was carried out in the shadows before the body was stripped of valuables and buried in the orchard behind the house. At the time, no one knew this. The disappearances remained a grim mystery, the kind that prompted uneasy glances when riding past the lonely little inn on the prairie. But soon the truth would begin to surface, and it would be far worse than anyone imagined. By the spring of 1873, the rumors had reached a breaking point. Too many travelers had gone missing in the same stretch of road, and Dr. William York's disappearance had pushed the community past patience. His brothers, one a colonel in the army, the other a Kansas state senator, arrived in Cherryvale determined to find answers. They questioned every farmer, shopkeeper, and innkeeper along the Osage Trail. When they reached the Bender place, they found the family polite but evasive. Kate, ever the talkative one, offered tea and spoke of how travelers often met misfortune elsewhere. Still, something about their encounter lingered with the search party. Days later, neighbors noticed something odd. The Bender cabin was silent. No smoke from the chimney, no animals in the pen. When a group of men rode up to check, they found the house abandoned. Inside, the rooms were stripped of food and supplies. The curtain still hung in the middle of the room, but behind it, the ground told a different story. The trapdoor in the floor creaked open to reveal the dark cellar below. When a man descended with a lantern, the beam caught something horrifying, thick, dark stains soaking into the dirt floor. The smell was unmistakable. The search moved outside, to the small orchard behind the house. It didn't take long to find disturbed soil. As shovels bit into the earth, the first body emerged. Dr. York, a crushing wound to the skull and a slit throat. Then another, and another. By the time the grisly work ended, at least a dozen bodies had been recovered, though some reports claimed more. Men, women, and even children, all killed in the same methodical way. The blows to the head had been delivered with brutal precision, likely by a hammer or mallet. The throats had been cut afterward to ensure death. The sheer brutality stunned the townsfolk. These were not crimes of passion or desperation. They were calculated, repeated acts committed over months, perhaps years. And yet, the killers were gone. The family had vanished into the open prairie, leaving nothing but their empty home, a blood-soaked cellar, and rows of shallow graves. The prairie had many dangers, but few could have imagined that one of the deadliest lay behind the door of a small, quiet inn. The discovery of the Benders' crimes sent shockwaves across Kansas and beyond. Word spread quickly. The bloody Benders, as newspapers began to call them, had murdered countless travelers and escaped into the wilderness. Almost overnight, a massive manhunt began. Posse after posse rode out from Cherryvale, scouring the prairie, following wagon tracks, and questioning anyone who might have seen a family matching their description. Rewards were offered, and wanted posters appeared in towns across the Midwest. But the Benders seemed to have vanished into thin air. Some trackers claimed the family split up soon after leaving. Pa and Ma heading one way, John Jr. and Kate another, making pursuit even more difficult. Over the next few years, sightings poured in from as far away as Texas, Colorado, and even New York. Each report sparked a frenzy of arrests and interrogations, but none could be proven to be the real Benders. Some suspects were jailed briefly, others released when evidence fell apart. Theories began to swirl. Some believed they had been caught and killed quietly by vigilantes, who didn't trust the courts to deliver justice. Others insisted they had assumed new identities and blended into frontier life, free to kill again. What no one could deny was the fear they left behind. Every lonely inn, every roadside cabin became a place of suspicion. Travelers were less trusting, and communities kept a sharper eye on strangers. The Benders had disappeared, but their shadow still stretched across the prairie. More than 150 years later, the fate of the bloody Benders remains one of America's great frontier mysteries. One theory holds that they were indeed caught soon after fleeing. Some locals claimed that vigilantes tracked them down, executed them, and buried their bodies in unmarked graves to prevent the costly burden of a trial. But without official records or graves to confirm it, this remains hearsay. Another possibility is that they successfully vanished. In the chaos of the post-Civil War frontier, changing your name and starting fresh was easier than one might think. If they split into pairs, they could have melted into different communities, their pasts hidden under layers of lies. There were even rumors that Kate was spotted years later in various cities, still practicing her spiritualism. Regardless of what happened, the story of the Benders took on a life of its own. Newspapers of the time sensationalized every detail: the curtain, the trapdoor, the orchard graves, turning the case into a macabre folk tale. It became a warning, passed down through generations, about the dangers of the road and the evil that could hide behind a friendly smile. Today, the Bender murders are remembered not just as a gruesome chapter in Kansas history, but as a symbol of the lawless and unpredictable nature of the American frontier. Museums, books, and documentaries continue to revisit the case, each trying to answer the question that still haunts historians and true crime fans alike. What really happened to the bloody Benders? Picture it, a moonless night on the Kansas prairie, the grass whispering in the wind. In the distance, the faint creak of wagon wheels drifts through the darkness, each turn carrying the Benders further from the scene of their crimes, or perhaps toward their next victims. No one knows where they went, or if they ever truly stopped. The orchard is long gone now, the soil turned over countless times, but some say that when the wind is just right, you can almost hear the trapdoor groan open and the muffled thud of footsteps on dirt below. So, what do you think happened to the bloody Benders? Were they caught, or are their secrets still buried somewhere out there? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more chilling true crime stories.